Welcome everybody to today's afternoon webinar. And today is an incredibly relevant topic to so many of us because of everything that is happening with energy prices. We are looking today at energy saving quick wins. Matt and Annie are going to be telling us about where do we start? What do we do if we want to reduce the amount of electricity or oil or gas that your church is using? We're looking at practical things today. Setting your boiler controls, draft proofing, timers, water saving, what to do about looking at your bills and knowing if you're paying the right amount. Simple steps that don't cost the earth. Let me take you through a couple of housekeeping slides and then I'll hand over to our speakers for such useful information. We have got just a couple of webinars left this year, and I'm just starting to put all together the programme for the first few months of next year. So left this year, we have the second of our sessions on climate resilience. We had the first one last week. That was looking at how we can make our buildings more resilient to extreme weather. This second topic is looking at how we can use our church buildings to support our communities through increasingly extreme weather, flooding and hotter summers, colder winters and the like. We've then got on the 28th of November, we've got a second run of today's webinar. It's going to cover exactly the same ground. So if you get to the end of today and you think, oh, I know other people who should have been here, then please do let them know that firstly, we're recording it, but also we are running it again on Monday, the 28th of November at 4 o'clock. And then the other thing was just a little pointer through to the Caring for God's Acre Autumn series. They are running 5 different topics, all to do with different aspects of churchyards. When I have finished the housekeeping and handed over to Matt, I'll find the links through to the booking for all of those webinars and I'll put them in the chat. In terms of today's housekeeping, it's all the usual if you've been to one of our webinars before. So we'll be using the Q&A for the questions rather than the chat. So if you've got any questions, find the Q&A, that's where to pop them, and you can do thumbs up next to the questions that other people have posted. And when we have time at the end, we'll start with the ones with the most votes and work our way through until we run out of time. After the webinar, I will send everybody Matt and Annie's slides, and I will send you any links that have been shared in the chat. And we are recording today's webinar and we'll be sharing it through our website. We've already got a recording from when Matt ran this session. Oh, it must have been 18 months ago now, I think. But it's been a little bit updated for today, and we've also got Annie. So you're very welcome to find, if you want to watch the video straight away, you can see the one from when we ran it before, or if you give us a few days, the recording from today will be on the website. Now, finally, most importantly, our 2 speakers today. So most of the time is going to be from Matt Fulford. Matt is the Director of Inspired Efficiency. He is an incredibly experienced church and school energy auditor and has done hundreds of both now, and also analysed the results for the Church of England so that we can learn from those audits that have been done. He's also the Sustainability Advisor for Gloucester Diocese. You are in very experienced hands. Once Matt has finished, we're just going to have a few minutes from Annie Ray, who is the marketing manager with Parish Buying, and she's going to tell you what support Parish Buying can offer you that will help you to achieve the kind of things that Matt is talking about. Right, I will stop sharing my screen. And Matt, we're over to you first to share your slides and take us away.
Excellent. Thank you, Catherine. Hopefully everybody can see those well. So yeah, for the next sort of 30 minutes or so, I'm just going to run through, as Catherine says, a whole range of little bits of tips and suggestions about how you can save energy and energy costs in this time. And we'll just run through those. So yeah, we'll be looking at all sorts of bits and pieces. Hopefully when you will come away from this, you'll have lots of things that you can think about doing in your own churches that will both save you money and save you energy at the same time as well. So that's the idea, that's the intent. covering lots of different grounds, as Catherine says. We'll take questions in the Q&A box at the end. But I thought it'd be worth just starting with why probably 109 of you are here this afternoon, which is obviously the major concerns we have around the increasing price of energy. I update this slide pretty much every time I do a presentation on the graphs of where energy prices have gone over the last year or two. And as you can see from those graphs, and as you will be very well familiar with, these are actually the wholesale prices of energy looking forward. So if you're looking at buying a fixed rate into the market, these are the sort of the market which that sort of fixed rate is bought from. You see the huge increase in there, a 7-fold increase in electricity rates, a 9-fold increase in gas rates if we go back kind of 2 years. So massive increases on that. But you can also see the amount of volatility or the spikes that have happened in that really from January of this year onwards. It's been up and down massively. So we have seen some very high points. It has fallen just a little bit in recent weeks for various reasons in the market, but it is expected to go up and down quite a bit recently. I thought I'd also just mention about the Energy Bill Relief Scheme, and that is the government's title for the support that it is providing to non-domestic users around energy bills, and just outline where things are with that, so you're fully up to speed and with that. So churches will get relief from that scheme. So there's one scheme for domestic users and one for non-domestic, and it's the non-domestic scheme, which is called the Energy Bill Relief Scheme, that churches will benefit from. And you will get some help with that if you've agreed on fixed price contracts after the 1st of December 21. So if you enter into a fixed price contract after that date, or if you're on a variable out of contract deemed or flexible contract, then again, you'll also get support from this scheme. The schemes all geared up around wholesale prices, which gets really confusing because you buy in retail prices. Basically the scheme will cap, and this is roughly, and it's a bit approximate, but will cap your the prices you pay roughly around about 32 pence a kilowatt hour for electricity and around about 10 pence a kilowatt hour for gas. They could easily fluctuate by a couple of pence just because of various differences in suppliers and markets and other charges you get within that rate. But that's broadly where the scheme is looking to cap it to. That relief will be provided by means of a discount. So you'll still be charged whatever rate it is that you've bought at, be that flexible or a fixed rate, but then you'll see another line on your bill that says the discount, which will bring it down to those prices. The suppliers will automatically put that on your bill from the 1st of October. So the bills you're probably likely to be starting to receive now if you're on a monthly billing rate, through to the 31st of March next year. After that, the scheme is being reviewed. I don't know what they're going to do, and I will be watching the autumn statement very carefully on Thursday, because I think that might give some indication. Until then, I'm afraid your guess is as good as mine. So that's some of the relief that is out there that you will get, but obviously it's very short term on there. So now on to lots of those tips around how to save some money. The very first place to start is looking at your bills and making sure you're not being paid too much. We know that several churches, in fact, lots of studies have suggested that 5 to 10% of churches are paying the incorrect amount on their energy bills because they haven't declared their VAT status correctly to their supplier. So as a church, you are a charity, and as a charity, you should never be paying 20% VAT or being charged what's known as climate change levy. You'll probably see it on your bill as CCL. That's only there for profit-making businesses. It's not there for charities. So if you have a look at your energy bill and you see, let's just get the pointer on, you see these sorts of lines in there. So the giveaway is that you're being charged 20% VAT. And then you'll find another charge in there saying that you're being charged CCL. If you see that on your bill, what you need to do is contact your supplier, and they will ask you to fill out a VAT declaration. to make it quicker and easier, if you go onto any online search engine and type in the name of your supplier and the word VAT declaration, it will come up with an online form normally. It's only about a page long, and it just needs your name or account number and those kind of bits and pieces, and the reason why you are declaring yourself as VAT at 5%, and that is because you are a charity. And if you then send that to your supplier, they will make sure that they remove this charge from all your bills going forward. You are able to claim that back for up to 6 years. It's quite easy to do that if you're with the same supplier for that period of time. It's very difficult to do that if you've changed suppliers in that time. So you can normally go back as far as you can go with your current supplier. You'll probably find a lot of your bills will have only 5% VAT added onto them, because they're very small consumptions. So often we find that most electricity bills in churches, particularly the large amount of churches we have that are the sort of rural parish churches, they're almost all electricity is naturally, because it's at a low consumption rate, and often the gas bills are as well, but particularly in summer. So the bills to really watch out for are your gas bills in winter. A lot of those can suddenly trip over and get the higher VAT rate and CCL rate added onto them. And if that is the case, as I say, go along online and get that VAT declaration into your supplier as quickly as you can and ask them for a rebate on there. Another thing on procurement, the quickest win around getting to net zero carbon is actually to procure 100% renewable sources of energy. And I know Annie is going to be mentioning about the parish buying scheme later, so highlighting how you can do that. Another good starting point is always to look at how much energy you're consuming. And if you complete the energy footprint tool as part of your annual parish return, that will give you a result looking something like this, although I hope it doesn't look like this, because this is a church you can see has got quite a poor energy efficiency rating in there. It's at the lower end of that scale. Really, you want to be right at the top if you can. And that's giving you an indication of how energy efficient you are compared with other churches, both in terms of your area and how often your church is being used in there. So that can give you a good guide as to whether you're doing well, and if you're doing well, and it's probably going to be harder to find savings in there, or if you're doing really badly, in which case hopefully you'll find many savings to be found quite easily, and you can make lots of quick wins in there. So that's the first place to look, is understanding how much energy you're using in there. Another quick tip, looking at energy meters and billing, is a lot of churches quite rightly use electricity through what's known as a dual rate meter. So you're buying cheaper electricity at evenings and weekends. The weekends part of that is obviously the most important part for a lot of churches, because that's when they use. And you'll be paying a higher rate during the day, but that doesn't matter for a lot of churches because a lot of them aren't used particularly heavily during the peak times in the day. And the old-fashioned way, which still exists out there in an awful lot of places, was to have this meter with obviously the two lines on it here, which is for your night and your day reading, and a mechanical time clock that's next to it. And that time clock basically tells this meter whether you are on peak or off peak or not. However, when you see this arrangement, you often find this time clock here has lost or gained time, and is quite typically set to the wrong time and even sometimes the wrong day. So that's telling this meter when it's peak and off peak. But if it's set to the wrong time or the wrong day, actually it can mean that when you're in the church using it heavily, perhaps on a Sunday, rather than the meter thinking it's a Sunday, it actually thinks it's on a Monday, for example, and therefore is charging you peak rate when you should be charging off peak rate. So if you have one of these arrangements, do check this dial and see what the day and the time on it is. And if it's wrong, contact your supplier, tell them that you have a meter error and that they need to come out and sort their meter. It is their meters, not yours. They shouldn't charge you for the privilege of coming out and correcting that. And they are likely to come out and actually install a brand new meter, which will be a smart meter as well, if you have that. So do go along and check. Firstly, whether you're on a night and day tariff rate, and if you aren't, you can certainly something you can consider as well. And if you are, check your meter and make sure it's actually set to the right time out there. Then we'll go and have a look at some of the issues around heating. We know that within churches, heating is by far and away the biggest energy user in there. Often 90% plus of your energy you'll be using to heat your building. So electricity normally quite low, and gas and oil much, much higher. So we'll focus a little bit on the heating and a few quick tips around things you can immediately do within there. Firstly, go along to your boiler and have a look at your boiler, and they'll have some dials, or a dial, one or two dials on the front of it. And what those dials do is set the flow temperature that comes out of the back of the boiler. So how hot the water is that comes out the back of that boiler. And most radiators and heating systems and all those kind of things really want kind of 70 to 80 degree temperature in there. But a lot of these boilers, if you turn them up to max, will be getting much closer to 95, which is actually just too high and is wasteful of heat. And it takes a lot of energy to go up to those high levels in there. So if you have a single dial on your boiler, typically that wants to be set around about the 2/3 level. So this is an example of going from 1 to 6. So the sort of normal level that would want to be set at, where it would function quite well, is going to be in about that 4.5 range in there. So if you find it's turned up to max, just bring that down a little bit. It will save you quite a lot of gas by doing that. If you've got this style of boiler, which has actually got 2 dials on it, this is because you have a burner that operates in 2 modes. One of it is this boost mode. It's called high flame, and it really provides a lot of energy into the heating system to get it up. And then you have a low flame setting, which is when the burner just backs off a little bit and keeps it ticking over. So it's a little bit like driving a car in 3rd gear as opposed to driving in 5th gear. So one is the other. Really, you want the high flame temperature setting to be lower than the low flame temperature setting. So the high flame takes it up, let's say to the level of 6, and your low flame dial just does that last bit. So if you set that at let's say 7, that's the way you want it set, because then you're using the high flame to get it up and then low flame to keep it ticking over once it's up there. If you reverse them around the other way, basically means your high flame is going to be working all the time, and that's pretty much like driving your car down the motorway in 3rd gear. You'll be consuming an awful lot more fuel in doing that. So do make sure if you have that arrangement on your boiler, they are set up right. And it is slightly counterintuitive, because you want the high flame dial set to the lower and the low flame dial set to the higher level. So hopefully that's explained those in there. Not all boilers have 2 dials on them. The bigger commercial ones tend to, but the smaller domestic ones will just have that single dial. The other area you really want to have a look at is your frost protection level in there. We know that within churches, something like 1/3, just less than 1/3 of the fuel usage can actually be due to the system firing under frost protection. So somewhere within your system, you're likely to have a frost stat. Look something like this. Now, the giveaway between the frost stat and the internal temperature thermostat is that a frost stat will normally start at a minus figure, -5 is fairly typical, and will only go up to 10 or 15 degrees, whereas an internal room temperature sensor will often start at about 10 degrees and will go up to 30 degrees, something along those lines. So you know if you're at the frost stat because it'll have a minus figure on it and then the reading of 0. If these are set to too high, basically the boiler and the heating system will kick in much earlier. So what these are doing is they're looking at the air temperature around that thermostat, and as soon as the air temperature gets below the setting on this thermostat, the boiler system will kick in. It's probably something you'll never notice, because typically it happens in the middle of the night when obviously the air is at its coldest. We would advise that these frost stats really should be set down at a level slightly above 0. So something in about the 4-degree mark is typical, but do just have a look at the space in which that thermostat is in. And if it's in a particularly warmer pocket, you might want to set it a little bit higher. If it's in a cold frost pocket, you might want to set it a bit lower, so that it's tripping the boiler on appropriately. I did find one in the church the other day that was set at 9 degrees. And we instantly managed to reset that. And the church warden did mention to me, goes, I did often wonder why when I wandered past the church, the boiler would be firing when it shouldn't be. And that was the reason why. We brought that down to 4 degrees for them. And they will be saving a good amount of gas from that. So do go along and have a look at your Frostat. Sometimes they can be behind a cover which has got a little, which is plain. It looks like it's just a square box, has a little screw on the bottom of it, and if you unscrew that, then you get a dial beneath that cover. It just stops people tampering with it. So if you have one of those, you may just need to take a little screwdriver in your pocket to be able to access that in there. Then we're going to come on to the big issue, and I'm sure I'm going to get plenty of questions about this, which is around background heating within churches. Generally, and there are lots of caveats and lots of health checks on this, but generally within churches, consistent background heating is not normally required. As I say, there are lots of reasons about that. So if you've got your heating system running all the time, do seriously have a look at that and question about why that is the case. If there is no good reason, then consider turning it down and eventually not using background heating at all in there. There is that is on all the time. There's a slightly worse situation that I often see used within churches, which is, we just flick the heating on for an hour or so each day to try and keep the chill off or try and keep the damp out, something along those lines. So it's not running all the time, it's literally just being flipped on for an hour a day because someone thinks that is the right and proper thing to do. That form of heating, just flicking it on for an hour, can actually cause far more problems than it solves. What's really important within churches is we try and keep a stable temperature and humidity. So 2 easy ways to achieve that. One is to have the heating system on constantly, 24 hours a day. The other is not to have the heating system on at all. Obviously, the most energy efficient one of those is not to have the heating system on at all. But what the flicking it on for sort of an hour every morning does is it suddenly increases the temperature, increases the humidity in that building, and then once it's gone off for the hour, it will cool down. You'll get condensation building up because you've changed the amount of by changing temperature, you change the ability of the air to hold moisture. So as it cools down, it loses moisture, and that builds up condensation. And you'll get these big fluctuations occurring every day that's happening, and that's actually very harmful for the fabric. So if you do use that sort of method at the moment, please have a serious think about whether that's appropriate for you, and if possible, then start to turn that off in there. Really important caveats around that. Please do consider any important artifacts you have that may need special attention, particularly wall paintings. So medieval wall paintings on different types of mediums, we've got stone or plaster or whatever else, do need much more careful management of that. And that may be a good reason why you've got your heating running and you don't want to suddenly change that. Organs would also need some degree of consideration. So if you're constantly running your heating at the moment and you think actually the only reason we're doing that is the organ can be treated in its own right, and those people that come out and maintain and service your organ will be able to advise on where they can put little heaters inside the organ casing itself to make sure it's all kept very happy, and allow you to turn the rest of the heating off in the church. But you may need to take advice, well, you certainly will need to take advice if you have got constant background heating at the moment, you're going, actually, we want to turn it off, then do make sure you get that proper advice and consider all of the issues that are in there. There'll be lots of things going on, but generally background heating in churches is to be avoided. If you do need it, then actually to be running at a level of somewhere between 8 and 10 degrees is probably most appropriate. So those churches that are running background at 14 degrees is probably way too high, even if you have wall paintings and those kind of things that are in there. But do take advice on that moving forward. Lots of other things you can do to try and keep people comfortable without putting huge amounts of heating into the space. There's lots of ways in which people feel thermally comfortable or thermally uncomfortable, and one of those is to do with the surface temperature which you are directly in contact with. and when you're in a church, that is likely to be the surface temperature of the pew that you are sat on, as well as the ground on which your feet are resting. So there can be useful methods to deploy which make people feel more comfortable at slightly lower temperatures. So putting cushions on the pew can obviously help that feel warmer, and they come in different forms. In there, having pew runners, so strips of carpet or something along those lines, in front of the pew on which to rest your feet, means you're not resting them on the cold stone floors, if that's what you've got underneath your pews, or even resting them on timber floorboards which have got cold drafts running up from underneath them, is often the case because there's big ventilated voids underneath those raised timber pew platforms in many cases. So putting a strip of carpet or something like that there so that people are resting their feet on a much warmer surface can help everybody feel much more comfortable within there. There are also now a range of heated pew and chair covers that are available out there, and I think Annie will just be mentioning that very quickly because they're available through Parish Way. So they can be quite useful for providing people with a little bit of extra comfort, a little bit like sitting on a heated seat, as you'll be probably familiar with in cars if you have a newer car with a heated seat and all that luxury within it. Other things to think about is actually, are your service times held at the most useful time for heating the church, and can they be moved? And I know there'll be lots of other restrictions and considerations within that, but if the service times move back slightly later into the morning, it gives time for the sun to come up and warm up the building naturally, rather than having to rely on too much heating within there. And other things around, actually, a lot of churches are telling me they're holding their PCC meetings in the winter in the church, and they need to heat it for that function. And I tend to very politely challenge whether the church is the best place to have a PCC meeting in the middle of the winter, because you're probably choosing to have your meeting in what is the coldest and hardest to heat building in the parish. So perhaps meeting around someone's dining room table, going down to the local pub, meeting in a village hall, wherever you feel might be appropriate, could be a good way not only of keeping those heating bills down and not burning too much gas because you're going to venues that are already otherwise heated, but actually also might encourage the church to be seen out in the community a little bit more as well. So can have double benefits in there. Other quick tips on timers and those kind of bits and pieces. If you have hot water units, so often a little box underneath the sink in the kitchenette area, that will be producing a little bit of hot water for you. That really ought to have a timer on it, so that it only turns on when you need it to turn on. I know many churches do it manually and just flick the switch on when they arrive and flick it off when they leave, which is fine so long as you remember to do that. But you can get automatic timers for those switches where hot water heaters wire into. So this is a direct replacement for the fuse spur that they'll wire into, and that's got an automatic timer on it, so you can easily get an electrician to install one of those if you're in the habit of leaving it on all the time, and that will automatically turn it on and off when you set the timers for in there. External floodlighting. So I'm talking about that lighting which is illuminating the building to show off its beauty to everybody that walks or drives past. I'm not talking about security lighting. So security lighting is best dealt with by having lighting at a lower level, so at ground level, so illuminating the ground rather than illuminating the tower, and it's set to go trigger off on motion sensors for security lighting, because as soon as someone then walks past, the light flicks on, and anybody else in the area will then go, oh, why did that light suddenly look on? And turn around and look in that direction, and that provides a much better level of security than just having lighting on all the time. So from a security point of view, having lighting on all the time, all that does is highlight to those people up to no good where all the dark spots are, and that's where they'll loiter. So security lighting, definitely do on motion sensors. External floodlighting that's lighting your building should be on a timer. Typically the timers look something along those sort of lines. And if you are having the floodlighting coming on, you might it should be coming on obviously when it's dark, so coming on at dusk. Much of these timers automatically know when dusk is, and then it should be going off no later than 11 o'clock at night. So floodlighting the buildings after 11 o'clock at night isn't showing off its beauty, it's causing light pollution. So please do get lighting off after 11 o'clock at night. You may want to consider whether it's appropriate to be lighting the building at all. I know some churches that have turned it off as we are facing challenges with energy and energy costs in there. And I know lots of other churches that do lots of other different things. Some churches only have their floodlighting on at the opposite times to when they have their flowers. So they'll only have their floodlighting on in Lent and in Advent to highlight the church in the lead up to those important festivals. I know other churches that will get people in the community to pay a little bit to sponsor the lighting being on a particular day. And that's often in memory of somebody or to celebrate an anniversary or something along those lines. Obviously, it's quite a lot more administration to be turning the lights on and off for those different events, but it does bring in some income for that as well. So there are lots of different ways you can think about that reduces the external floodlighting time if you have those within your church. And within many churches, we see that as being the highest electrical using part of the church, normally much more than the internal lighting, because it's often on every single night. So do consider that. Other bits and pieces of maintenance that you can do around the place. So a little bit of cleaning doesn't go amiss. And I'm talking about cleaning your heating system, which is probably not what you're expecting to hear me tell you to clean. So first of all, if you have fan heaters, they would obviously normally have a cover on, so this one at the bottom here. When you take the cover off, there is a filter at the top here. And that filter will benefit from getting a nice little hoover out once or twice a year and very gently sucking the dust off here so the air can flow through that filter much better. You can also very, very gently suck any debris off the top of these very delicate fins, which are actually the bit that gives the heat out here. Often better if you use that little kind of brushy end of the hoover attachment onto that, so you're not going to cause any damage, because you really don't want to bend any of those fins. That would be not good news, or start ripping the filters that can be slightly delicate. So get the brush attachment on the end of the hoover, remove the cover and give that a good hoover out once or twice a year. Typically sort of, well, okay, a month or two ago would have been a really good time, but now when the heating season is coming on is really good. You also want to have a look at your radiators, and these are some thermal images. Probably most people are familiar with looking at thermal images now. So the lighter colours, the whites and the yellows are heat, and the colder colours are where it's colder. So the blues and the purples are where it's cold. You don't need a thermal imaging camera though. You can run your hand up and down and across the side to side on a radiator, and you can feel whether it's warm or cold or not. So as all your heating is going to be coming on, I know plenty of people that are managing to avoid turning it on at the moment because we're obviously experiencing much warmer conditions than we would normally be doing at this time of year. But as the heating system comes on, do check your radiators, run your hand from the top to the bottom or vice versa, and feel where the radiator is hot. It should be the same temperature across the whole of the radiator. If it is cold at the top and warm at the bottom, that means that you have air in your radiator. And you can simply get an air bleed key and maybe a little cloth or something to catch spits of water that come out. Open the air bleed key slightly, allow the air to escape from the radiator, and then the whole radiator will be warm, and that will allow the heating system to perform much better in there. If you have the opposite, so it's hot at the top, but it is cold towards the bottom, that is because you have sludge build up within your radiator. So there's a whole load of magnetic sort of sludge from all the inside of your pipes. It's built up at the bottom of your radiator in there, and that's causing that to perform badly. Technically, where that sludge builds up actually slightly depends on where the pipes are on your radiator. So this radiator here has a pipe coming in and out at the bottom, and therefore the sludge builds up in this sort of slightly inverted U shape in the middle of the radiator. This radiator here has the inlet coming in at the top and the outlet at the bottom, and it builds up more towards that side. That's the difference between those two. If you have that sludge buildup in there, you need to ask your plumbing and heating engineer if they can do a flush on your system, and that can get rid of the sludge, which is what happened between these two photographs here. And you'll or radiator in your heating system perform much better. I know many people are quite rightly concerned about putting a flush around their whole system because they've got underground pipes, which they know are a little bit leaky and a bit delicate. You can just flush a radiator, so you can actually just disconnect it on its inlet and outlet, and then get a plumber just to flush the radiator itself. So if you know it's a particular problem, you can do it that way in there. Other bits and pieces that are worthwhile doing are going to be making sure that your pipework is lagged. Your boiler room should not be the warmest place within your church, but frequently it is. And that's because we've got pipework like this, which has just got no insulation on it at all. Often it occurs around pumps. So these are pumps, and you can see the lead up to those. You've got bits of lagging missing off the pipes here, but actually on the straight joints, where it was really easy for somebody to insulate it, they have put the lagging on it, and you can see the difference that makes with that heat loss. So within many boiler rooms, unlagged pipework is like having 6 radiators on down there, and you don't really want to be losing all that heat into the boiler room. So you can get lots of pipework lagging that can easily go over these bits, and you can get flexible jackets and all sorts of bits and pieces that can go around pumps and valves and the more complicated shapes, which is well worth doing in there to try and make sure as much heat is getting into the church building proper and is not just warming up your boiler room. Drafts are really the biggest enemy against feeling comfortable. There's nothing more unpleasant than having a cold draft running down the back of your neck or up your trouser leg. So we really want to try and avoid drafts as much as possible. And drafts are an uncontrolled form of ventilation. So it's fine to have a bit of ventilation, but ventilation is what you can control. Drafts are what you can't control. So we want to try and avoid these drafts the best we possibly can. And some quick tips around that. Doors are often very poorly sealed, and most often it's the bottom of the door that is the worst area of the door for letting cold drafts in. So even when this door is shut, and this was a relatively modern door, you can see the cold at the bottom and it's streaming in across that floor. There. So bottom of doors, really big issue, can be quite simply solved with a sort of sausage dog style draft excluder that goes in at the bottom of the door, and particularly if that door is not being used very much, you can sort of tuck that neatly in there and will stop that cold air whipping into the church and causing those unpleasant cold drafts out there. If it is a fire door and it opens outwards, then you can start to think about attaching that draft excluder sort of sausage dog to the door so that it actually moves with the door as it goes out and doesn't cause some of the trip hazard in there. Other areas that can cause problems are keyholes, and we can have some very, very large keyholes within church doors, and you can put your hand over those and you can really feel a cold draft rushing through. And the best tip I have for those, because most of them are metal, is to get an old fridge magnet if you want to paint it black, and then you can attach that fridge magnet to the keyhole on the inside. Still means that the key can work from the outside, and it stops that cold air driving through the keyhole. We find a lot of these sort of opening hopper lights within the leaded lights and stained glass and those kind of bits and pieces within churches. And more often than not, they seal really badly around the outside of the frame. The frames don't tend to sit very well together. So it can often be a big source of drafts there. And the best tip for that is to go down to your local craft shop and buy some black, or whatever colour the frame is, plasticine. And you can literally push the plasticine into that gap that's there. And the wonderful thing about plasticine is it doesn't stick. It sticks a little bit, so it doesn't sort of stick in a really bad way to the metalwork. So you can peel it off and reverse it if you need to. And that's actually a method that is approved by most heritage organisations as being quite appropriate to block up those holes in there. So please use plasticine. Don't use bathroom mastic. That's a disaster. So plasticine is the thing to be using there. There are many easy to change light bulbs out there. Some are harder to change. Some you'll possibly need an electrician to look at changing for you. But changing to LED light bulbs now is pretty much a no-brainer. The light output from them is superb, and the cost of them have come down massively. So it just makes sense to do them all in there. These are some common types of lights that are out there that you'll see in churches. So these are reflector lights. Again, literally unscrew one, screw the other one in, and that will go down from 120 watts if it's not LED to about 15 watts if it is. So huge savings out there. You get two types of these little downlight spots. If it's got these lugs on the bottom of it, very easy to change as the mains voltage one. It's got two pins on the bottom of it, pushes in and out rather than twists in and out. That's a low voltage one, and you will need to make sure you've got the transformer matching the actual lamp that you're using. Otherwise, they will flicker and hum and do all sorts of horrible things. So you may need an electrician to help you with that one. Again, classic light bulbs, very easy to change yourselves in there. Other types of light fitting, and you'll have plenty of them, may just need an electrician to come out and advise you on what to change for, and will often need the whole fitting being changed, so they can do that fairly easily for you. Also, don't forget water savings. Water is another utility that actually costs way more per cubic metre of water than it does to buy a kilowatt hour of gas or electricity. So if you are using water within your church, do think about saving, trying to save a little bit on the water as well. You can actually contact most local water companies will provide free water saving kits for charities, so you can get the bags that go into the toilet systems. You can get little attachments that will make your tap into a lower flow unit in there as well. So if you do have water being used, then do ask your local company and see what they've got to offer for free. We'll take questions at the end, and I'll hand back to Catherine.
Thank you so much, Matt. Just before I hand over to Annie, who's got her slides in just about 5 minutes, I think, of talking about parish buying. Matt, we've got quite a lot of questions that have rushed in. So if there's any of those which are kind of simple factual things and you can just deal with by typing an answer in, let's do that whilst Annie's speaking. Otherwise, we'll come back to the ones where you think everyone would want to hear the answer. Annie, can I hand over to you to tell us a little bit about what parish buying can do to support people through all of this?
You certainly can. All right. Oh. Sorry, I can't get this to work.
Well, we can. At the moment, we haven't got your slideshow, but we can see your slides if you want to just.
Okay, well, I won't be able to go through them though because I cannot see them.
Oh,
awkward. But also, it went so well in the rehearsal.
It did. Practiced it twice and it worked beautifully both times.
Oh, now I'm into something else.
You have shared your screen. It's just that it's on. It's your whole PowerPoint rather than your slideshow.
I think that I can probably live with, rather than yes. If you don't, oh dear.
There we go.
Is that okay?
Yeah, we're on to what is parish buying now.
Okay, all right, so I won't waste any more time. So what is parish buying? I think judging by the questions, quite a lot of people know what parish buying is, but it's a service provided by the Church of England. It's really aiming to procure things centrally to help churches. They don't all spend lots of time finding power or photocopier paper or whatever else it is. It's got 24,000 registered members. We keep on trying to provide more things that people need, so we research it regularly. It's a free service. The money that comes into parish buying comes from the commission that suppliers pay. So in terms of trying to sort of dovetail really with the things that Matt was talking about, we start with the simple things, and a lot of the things that we talked about or that Matt talked about are in a booklet which we've just recently produced. There's lots of his items in there, but there's also additional things added by the church buildings commissioners, the DAC conference, the environmental team. We tried to bring everything together so that people had one place to go to, that sort of middle range of energy saving ideas that, they're not put another sweater on or put a blanket over your knees, but neither are they, stick a rack of solar panels up on your roof. One of the things that parish buying offers is the energy audit, which is a professional company, comes into your church, spends quite a lot of time there talking to you, looking at your paperwork, and comes up with a report of things that you could actually do. because I'm short of time, I'm not going to go through exactly how you apply for it, because you can look at that on the Parish Buying website. But the interesting thing, as far as we're concerned, is it's normally £445 plus VAT, but we're using some of our budget to offer people a discount. So you get £100 off, which makes it £345 plus VAT. What do you get for your £345? You get quite a nice weighty little document telling you all of these things, what your energy saving recommendations are, what that translates into in kilowatt hours, given an average tariff, what that equates to in money, how much it will cost to implement, because obviously if it's going to cost you £200 to implement but only save £5, you might want to prioritise that lower down the list. How long it would take to pay back, whether you'd need special permissions, faculties, that sort of thing, and how much carbon you'd save. So it's a really helpful first step, because otherwise you can just sort of look and think, well, I just don't know where to start. Energy tariffs, we have the Energy Basket, which has run successfully for many, many years. It's closed for entry this year because people enter the Energy Basket on the 1st of October. But you can sign up to join it at any time to start your membership on the 1st of October next year. We also do fixed term contracts using a platform that go out to lots of different suppliers. I'd have to say it's not an easy market. And so I've seen in the chat that people have been talking about difficulties with that. The issue is that churches don't use a lot of power. And so suppliers are tending to focus on bigger consumers. And it also means that because the market, as Matt showed with his graphs, is so volatile, you can have a price quoted in the morning and the supplier may very well withdraw that price in the afternoon. So it's different to how it's ever been before. It's a really fast moving market, and it's hard for everybody. But we are still doing those things. We are still able to get quotes on most days. And as Matt said earlier, it's sustainable electricity. Green gas is available, but it's quite expensive because of just general problems with gas. And then again, direct heating. Matt was talking about, the really basic one, strips of carpet on the floor, that kind of thing to stop drafts. But we also have a supplier who supplies under pew heaters. So you're actually sitting on something warm that's plugged into the mains, which isn't as alarming as it sounds. It's just a nice gentle heat. There are also infrared heaters available, radiant heaters. And one that we're looking at the moment is heated cushions, which are cushions that you charge up separately. And somebody could be, issued with a cushion as they come into the church, and they will sit on a nice warm cushion. And it really, on days when it's not, obviously not when there's snow on the ground, but on days when it's sort of a moderate temperature, or you maybe have got your space heating on, but there are people who are still cold, possibly elderly people, it can really make the difference and mean that you haven't got to keep on cranking up the heating to make everybody comfortable. It's quite a varied market. And so we're actually running a pilot at the moment. We've bought some that are sort of £10 from Amazon. We bought some that are £200 from a specialist company. And we're trialing them among 36 churches. So they'll be sent a couple of cushions each, and then we're going to do some research amongst them and try to come up with some really good advice for churches on, if you've got this budget, this is the best one you could look at. If you've got that budget, you could go this way. And just to really try and work out what's good out there and what isn't. And I know Catherine is also running a trial in St Ed's and Ips diocese with some other heated cushions. So as we get results back from churches, we'll be posting those up there. There was a really, really good webinar as well, which is actually from Catherine Ross's team, but I love it. I think it should get an Oscar, on heating your church, direct heating. And I put the link to it down there. It's really worth watching, because I did see that there were some other questions about that. Other things that Parish Buying can offer you, we've got good solar panel fact sheets, and we have a supplier of solar panels. We've got fact sheets on LED lighting, which is quite a quick win, really, in ways that you can reduce your electricity consumption. We've got air source heat pumps supplier, ground source heat pumps, solar panels. Well, I said solar panels already, but yeah, there's bigger stuff there too. But I think that's kind of outside the remit of what we're talking about today. So really, in terms of next steps, if you're not registered with Parish Buying, it would be a good idea to register. It's free. It doesn't commit you to anything. You can even opt out of the newsletter if you just, all you want to do is literally get updates as they come on board. I put the link there for where to sign up. We look forward to hearing from you. There's a lot of investment in Parish Buying coming along. We are aware the website is clunky. It definitely has its shortcomings. We've had a new head of Parish Buying start today, so I think the future is looking good. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Right, how are we doing? We've got 10 minutes and we've got quite a lot of questions, so let's dive in. Now, several of them are about the section you began with, Matt, about billing and charges and VAT. So there's one about, is there anything to be done about standing charges where you've got a church that's only used occasionally? There's one about, do we have to register as a charity to get VAT relief? And another saying, do we get VAT relief on the church hall as well? Do you mind sort of taking that bundle?
Yeah, that's fine. Standing charges, sadly, no, there's not a great deal we can do on that. I'm aware they are going up massively at the moment as well, but there is very little practical action you can take on doing that. Different suppliers will have different standing charges, and different suppliers will have different rate structures. So some might charge you a higher rate, but a lower standing charge. So if you're a low user, that can be better. So don't just look at the rate, look at the whole bundle. You don't need to register as a charity. All churches are deemed to be charities by their church status. There is some legal bit somewhere on the Church of England website about that you can stick in front of anybody that really wants to know it. But basically, you are a charity by virtue of being a church within the Church of England. So you are already that. You don't need to register separately. Church halls can get the same VAT exemption so long as you are not making a profit out of them. And technically, so long as you're not making a profit out of more than 60% of the building. So you do just need to look about what the letting arrangements and those kind of things are. So if you're letting it out for profit, and that's more than 60% of the usage of the building, then you won't. But if you're just using it for the predominantly for the church benefit, and maybe just giving to brownies one night a week to use for something and charging them a peppercorn rent to cover the costs for that, then you will still be able to claim your VAT back.
Very good, thank you. And Annie, I think there was a question about standing charges and parish buying. I'm trying to find it now. Are they tied into the energy basket, given high standing charges?
Let's see what that was.
It's from Ian. It says, given the high standing charge, if we're tied into the energy basket, can we withdraw and be disconnected? We might need to do this.
Oh, that's probably beyond the marketing remit, actually, but I will certainly find out for you. I can't really say much more than that. I mean, my understanding is it is a year-long contract and that the power is bought in advance. But I would take it up with the people that are running it.
Lovely. So then we've got more sort of questions about the building and the heating system. So going back up to the top, Christopher has asked, have you got anything to say about oil heating apart from bad luck?
Well, actually, you'll probably be very surprised to hear, actually, it's not so bad luck for oil because the costs of oil have gone up an awful lot less than gas and electricity. So the rate increases we're seeing on oil, although they have gone up, haven't gone up anything like as badly as gas. So oddly, the increases won't be quite so painful as others. That doesn't mean to say that it's going to be any less painful for you, unfortunately. Obviously, the same comments apply on boiler temperatures and insulation and draft proofing, all those kind of things. Doesn't matter what heating fuel you're using, all those apply. Have a look up the age of your gas boiler if it's about to fail. If it's over sort of 15, 20 years old, we find a lot of churches with oil boilers that still have their pews are very worthwhile looking at electric under pew heaters. Much more efficient and much more comfortable in terms of thermally. But that would depend on your church and lots of other things, but that's probably the easiest thing to say.
And I'll pop 3 links into the chat, which might be of help if you're thinking about replacing your oil heating, one of which is our heating guidance, one of which is our webinars page, because we've got several on there about heating and how to approach heating, and then also the case studies page. And if you search in there for oil, there are a few examples of churches that have been on oil and have taken action of one kind or another. Right, the next, okay, this is a tricky one. The next question is from Chris, and it's about COVID. We've been told to keep our doors and windows open. How can we save energy without losing ventilation?
Yeah, more than happy to take this one. Managing air quality around for viral transmission, COVID, as well as flu and other viruses as well, is best done by looking at the carbon dioxide CO2 level within your building. If your CO2 level is below a level of around about 800 parts per million, then the air in there is really quite clean and safe, and you do not need to open your doors and windows. If it starts creeping up between 800 and 1500, you want to start thinking about opening those doors and windows just a little bit. They don't need to be fully open. If it goes above 1500, that's the time to throw everything wide open. You can get CO2 sensors very inexpensively from online or in most actual electrical wholesalers and even in DIY stores these days. So I would say get a CO2 sensor, put it somewhere appropriate within your church, and manage on that basis. But the kind of the slightly blind way of doing it, of just going, oh, I'm worried I'll have everything open, we can do it now much in a much more refined way with a CO2 sensor. And say you can buy them online, 20, 30 quid quite easily.
Forgive my ignorance, Annie, does Parish Buying sell those as one of the small, because you do quite a lot of items through your Office Depot, for example?
And it should. Yeah, I'll make a note of that.
Oh, you didn't expect to leave here with an action, did you?
I didn't. I've got two.
Next question from Lynn is about the heat curtain. So that's one of those heaters just above the door. Some are concerned with the cost of running it when we have our central heating on. Any view, Matt, from the church energy audits that you've done? Door heaters like that, heating curtains, are generally recommended or not? Or does it depend on circumstances?
Yeah, it depends on circumstances. They can be quite a useful way of heating that rear entrance of the church, particularly looking at, we talked about pew heating quite a lot, but there aren't any pews around there. It can stop the cold air rushing in and heat that sort of open space in there. Also, if you've got a heating system which is very slow to react, so it's building all this heat up and up and up, and then you're in the habit of opening the door for those sort of 10 minutes before the service to welcome everybody in, because obviously we do physically need to get people into the building, all the heat will be lost and you will never regain that during the service. So there was probably little point in heating it up in the first place. That doesn't make you feel any better because it's still uncomfortable in there. And I have, so an air curtain in that circumstance can really help to kind of keep the heat in the church. But other tips around that is, if you put whoever is meeting and greeting people and handing out the hymn books outside the door, they can give them the hymn book and have the little chat and say, how are you? And welcome to the church outside the door, open the door for them, let the person wander in, and then shut the door quickly behind them. Can be a way of keeping heat in there. It will mean that whoever is welcoming people into the church may want to come wearing a very thick coat because they're going to be outside for a little bit longer. But that can be a way of really helping to keep heat in the church.
Although that particular circumstance is one of the circumstances where I think that the heated seat cushions could prove to be really useful, because you could have a couple for the people who are outside the door doing the welcoming and then keep the door shut. And anyway, right. The next question is from Graham, is asking for a recommendation about a particular company that he's naming, and I'm afraid, Graham, I don't think we can comment on that. So I'm going to skip over that one. The most efficient type of freestanding heater to supplement hall heating occasionally? Is there
depends what sort of bit you're trying to do. If you're just trying to spot heat a certain area, the lectern or a performer in a concert or something along those lines, then the overhead ceramic ones can be quite effective if you're trying to heat a wider area, general area. So let's say the chancel or something along those lines, then you're probably going to want something with a fan on it. But yeah, pick your heater for what you do.
The next question is from Dennis, which is about getting quotations from Parish Buying. And he's put his email there. Could I maybe just ask you to pick that up offline? I think it's specific to his.
I've read your question, Dennis, so we'll get back to you on that.
Now, It's 1 minute to 5. We're not going to manage to answer all of these, are we? The next question is about LEDs and suitability for dimmers. That varies quite a bit. And perhaps if I just give you a link through to the recording of our lighting webinar, which was a really, really, really practical and helpful one. And I think you'll find the answers that you need in there.
Yeah, basically you need to match your LED lighting with your dimmer. That the two bits go together.
What Matt said. Okay, so the next question is taking us on to the amenity societies, I think, and the need for planning. So it's asking, does the Church of England have someone high up working on this already? So I wouldn't describe myself as high up in any sense, but myself and my colleagues do have regular discussions with the Historic England and with the amenity societies around their policies and practices in terms of those situations where churches need planning permission. We have just recently reviewed all of the faculty rules and changed those things which we could to make them more permissive and encourage net zero carbon. None of that process happens overnight, but the amenity societies and Historic England are well aware of the climate crisis and are reviewing their own policies and their own positions and on that journey in the same way that the Church of England is on that journey. I'm sorry for those of you who've still got questions in the list there, because I do think I need to bring us to a close because we're at 5 o'clock. Matt and Annie, thank you so much for coming today and speaking to us. What a lot of useful and practical information you have imparted today. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure everyone listening does as well. Everyone who's come along, thank you so much for coming. I hope you found it useful. I will send the slides and the links in the chat to everyone who has registered for today's webinar, and the recording will be on our website in a few days' time. We're also running it again a fortnight today, so you've got another chance if you want to come along or you want to get a colleague to come along. Now let me just save the chat and bring us to a close. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.